begin.
Welcome to a very special episode of Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. I'm Jeremy Munson, a former state representative, and with me, as usual, is Susan Sjogren-Smith. And in studio are gubernatorial candidate Kendall Qualls and his new running mate, Brian Nicholson. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show. The listeners have been anxious to get you guys on the air and hear about the campaign. The campaign, which started with a large field of candidates running for governor, is slowly narrowing. And of course, with all the latest straw polls, it seems to be coming down to just two or three candidates. And you and Lisa Damath Ticket are two of the front runners who are abiding by the endorsement. And so, Kendall, give us a little background on who you are for the few listeners who don't already know you. And then please introduce your running mate, Brian Nicholson.
Sure. Jeremy, thanks for having me. Susan, thank you also for having us. And we're excited. You know, the campaign is really humming along. We are just getting warmed up. You know, for your listeners that don't know much about me, look, I've made Minnesota our adopted home state. We love it here. We've been here for over a decade. Have grandkids that have been born here. Our adult kids, our 5 adult kids, have moved back to Minnesota, and they all live here. We want them to raise their family here. So my story would be some people would call it an American dream kind of story. Grew up in a divorced family. Part of my childhood was in Harlem, New York City, at the worst of times in the late 60s, early 1970s. Then I moved with my father when I was 11th grade to a trailer park in Oklahoma. That's when you know God loves you. He upgrades you to a trailer park in Oklahoma. And I live with my drill sergeant dad, and from that point on. But I always visited New York every summer during my breaks, my school breaks. And when I became 18 years old, in Oklahoma, you got to register. When you register to vote, you got to pick a party. I registered as a Republican. I didn't know any Republicans, but I saw what the Democrats did to the culture, the community in New York City. I said, I don't know what the Republican Party, I know it's about freedom and everything else, but I don't want to be one of them. And so I never looked back.
Good judgment for a young guy.
Yeah, at 18 years old. Never looked back, never turned around, but now I got all these Republican friends, and it's been great. And so that's my background. I worked full-time to pay my way through college. I was in the Army Reserve through college. I finished in 4 years and went on active duty, served as an artillery officer. Stateside as well in South Korea, right on the DMZ. But I wanted a different career than my father, and I got out in the private sector after that. And I share this one point because it's important, because it motivates my decision, both my time in service and this next story, where my first job was in sales. I worked for a big healthcare company, and I was so ready to put poverty behind me, and it was all about financial accumulation, wealth accumulation. Someone invited me to church. And the only reason I went was because it was a family friend. I just did it out of politeness. But I never heard the Bible taught that way before. He didn't preach. He was a teacher. His name was Tony Evans. It was in Dallas, Texas. And over the course of my career, Tony Evans was a pastor where I got baptized in that church. Max Lucado was one of the churches I went to, prominent, prolific Christian author. And so Sheila and I, we homeschooled our 5 kids. We adopted one. I can't remember which one. I would love them all the same. And I tell people, are you pro-life? I said, I just don't talk about pro-life. I lived it. We adopted that young baby when he was really days old. Actually, a couple of weeks, because in Texas, I think you have to wait 2 weeks. But basically, we already had 4 kids. And people say, well, why would you do something like that? Because in the book of James, what is religion? Take care of widows, take care of the fatherless. And so we adopted our son there, and he's now 21 years old, married, he works in a manufacturing company here in the state of Minnesota, and starting his life. So that's my background. My motivation is what's happening in our country, what's happening right here, the epicenter of Minnesota. Why I got involved in politics after never being involved, never held in public office, is because, number one, I felt there's an issue of our nation is under attack internally. Mm-hmm. And then second, my Christian faith, what's been happening here in our country and in our state spans beyond Republican, Democrat. I mean, this is good versus evil. Mm-hmm. right versus wrong. And God expects his people to stand up against evil.
Yeah, good people in both parties
That's
are
right.
looking around, thinking to themselves, what happened? And
That's right.
if you love Minnesota now, I can't imagine what you would have thought if you would have actually come when Minnesota was the Minnesota I grew up in, and Jeremy. I mean, the Minnesota 10 years ago was already so far removed from what we knew to be what it should be.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I can still remember going into Minneapolis, and it was still a safe place, and it was I just meant, what a beautiful place. The economy's great. You can raise a family here, and they never have to leave the state because there's so many different industries, right? But I saw that collapsing, and I saw what happened on the East Coast to New Jersey, New York, and all these others because I worked there at the corporate headquarters, and everyone was leaving the East Coast going south. And I said, man, we got to stop this from happening. So anyway, that's why I got involved in politics, to do that. So this time around, as I get ready to introduce Brian, I said, you know what? The last time I did have a running mate selected a week before the convention, or actually literally days before the convention. I'm not going to say the gender. That kid dropped out right before the convention. Just left me hanging. Like, man, I had that happen, when I was in middle school. I'm not going to,
I'm sure there were forces at work, believe me.
Yeah, but as I jest. But anyway, this time around, I said, you know what? What's happening is we got to get the attention of swing voters in our state. We don't have enough Republicans in this state to win it, especially in an off-year election when we're not going to have, President Trump on the ballot. And at this point, we need to have such a wide margin of victory that is too big to rig, or I call it a cheat-proof margin. And so I purposely was looking for someone outside of politics to be on the ticket with me. And looking at several different people, I got a chance to meet Brian on a tour of his facility where he worked as CEO. And was doing many touring farms and touring factories. His was one of them. And I just was very impressed with the technology, the innovation that these guys are implementing. And I called him a couple of weeks after. And I'll stop there. I'll let him tell the rest of that story. But that's how we met. It was in the past fall. And again, I don't want to take anything away from his story because it's pretty funny and it's kind of neat. But you know what? It is the wholesomeness and if anything, and it is the nature of being patriots that's why we're both involved. And I'll stop there.
So let us have it.
Yeah. Here we go. Well, thank you for having me. First of all, it's great to be out and telling this story, and I couldn't be more excited to be a part of this ticket and a part of this movement and this effort to save the state from what needs a lot of saving. My background, maybe I'll start there and then we'll pick up the story where Kendall left off. I was raised here in Minnesota. I'm a lifelong Minnesotan. I grew up in the northern suburbs. I grew up in Roseville. I went to the University of Minnesota. I got an undergraduate degree in computer science. I later got an MBA at Carlson School of Management. And most of my life, my professional life, has been focused on entrepreneurial efforts. We've started a couple dozen different enterprises and different companies. Some of them are little, some of them are bigger. And we've had a great success in creating business and opportunity here in the state. And across all of these different enterprises, we've created nearly 1,000 jobs in the state. We've created hundreds of millions of dollars of investment into the state. And really, we've learned how to do that, in spite of some of the headwinds that we have in this state. And that's been fun. It's been successful. And Kendall and I met, as he mentioned, at one of these companies where we're doing some crazy things in construction that are really fun and exciting that push the envelope of innovation in the construction space. And he called afterwards. We've made a couple hundred jobs at that facility over the last couple of years, and it's growing like crazy, and it's exciting. And because of that, we've had a fair number of political candidates come through. Current office holders have stopped by to visit, and that's great to see what we're up to and how it's going and what we need, and that's been really helpful.
Let's take a break, and because we've got just a few seconds left, and I want you to pick up right where you're leaving off here. When we come back from the break, you're listening to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson, my co-host, and we're really happy today to have Kendall Qualls, candidate for governor of Minnesota, and his recently announced running mate, Brian Nicholson, a lifelong Minnesotan.
That's right.
And businessman, entrepreneur, and very interested in helping return business to Minnesota, obviously create a better environment, but also make Minnesota Minnesota again. Right? You grew up here in this amazing state, and we were at the top of everything.
That's right.
The place to be. We were the destination for everything in Minnesota, and now, we're struggling. And it's not that we've lost who we are; it's just our system is attacking everything that was good about Minnesota. We got to fix it. So let's let you pick up where you left off.
Yeah. So Kendall and I met at one of the companies that I'm involved in, and that meeting went great, and we had the opportunity to chat afterwards, and we were talking about how necessary it was to get this state moved in a better place. And I had mentioned to Kendall that if there was anything he needed and anything I could do to help, don't hesitate to call. And I was surprised to hear from him just a few weeks later when he called and asked if there were, he said, I'm looking for I'm looking for my lieutenant governor. And I'd love to get any input that you have or any names that you think I ought to be considering. And he went on to describe, the characteristics that he thought would be appropriate. And this is so far from anything that I had ever considered. I was not being a politician is nothing that running for political office is nothing I've ever considered. So I heard the list of things that he was looking for and his qualifications that he desired. And it wasn't until after we hung up the phone that I thought, I think he's just described to me. I think he's just asked me to be his lieutenant governor. And so we got together for coffee, and my immediate reaction at coffee was, were you asking me to be a lieutenant governor? And he sat back in his chair and chuckled, and yes, sir, I was. And, my reaction to that was absolutely not. There's no way. You got the wrong guy. I'm not it. And one of the things that Kendall said, he sort of leaned forward, looked me squarely in the eyes, and said, this is not like a business venture that you need to consider. This is way deeper than that, and we need to think about, the faith, about whether you're called to do this or not, and I want you to pray about it. We need to talk about whether this is something from a patriotism level, and a patriotic perspective, which is different than most of the things that I have to decide on a regular basis.
Right. Thank you for asking him to consider those things, because I agree with you. Absolutely critical.
So this was a really prayerful decision for me and my family, and maybe I can talk about that for just a minute. I've been married from my wife for almost 20 years. We have 3 teenage children. I have twin boys that are 17. I have a daughter who's 13. My boys are big soccer players. They run around playing soccer all the time. My daughter's playing volleyball. So they're busy and living life as teenagers. And, they're a big part of this motivation that I have for doing what I'm doing. And in this process, was really prayerful and something that was a big decision. And it's one I'm excited to have made. And I've made this decision really from a place of duty. This is a necessary part of, I think, where many of us Minnesotans are. There's this line that has been crossed. Yep. And we all kept hoping that somebody else would step up and fix it. And when, Kendall's doing that, and when he asked me to do it, a big part of this is if not me, then who? Mm-hmm. And if not now, when? And those things, ultimately make this decision a little easier because we're way past the line and it needs help.
Way past.
And, I think one of the things that I would observe as more outsider than in by every measure possible is that doing the same thing again will not produce different results. We need a ticket that has a different look and a different shape, fresh ideas, innovation, and bringing some business leadership to government is sorely missing. And what we're looking for, I think what most of us Minnesotans are yearning for, is some hope and some direction and some vision. And that's the exciting part. And of course, in Kendall and I's business background, that's all day, every day. We have to have a vision, and we have to have motivation, and we have to want to be there, and we have to be able to put properly executing teams in place to be able to achieve those objectives. And government could use a fair dose of that.
Yeah, I think your discussion about your faith, your values is important, and I think Minnesota, I believe, used to be a state with a corporate culture that was really rooted in faith and in a sort of a moral. You didn't need the government to tell you to take care of your your family. Your business employees are part of your family.
That's right.
And it used to be that way in Minnesota, and it's changed, just like politics has changed, right?
Well, if maybe in the next segment, Susan, you can start out by read the preamble of the state constitution.
Right.
Tells you exactly what kind of state we were.
And guess what comes first? The Bill of Rights.
That's right.
That's not like it's not at the end. It's not an addendum. It's the very first thing after the preamble. It absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, God is a big part of the answer here. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So I for both of you, I mean, I really appreciate the outsider perspective. I know that it's difficult to run to be the next governor while bringing a history of being inside, right? You can't, it's hard to, I face this a lot too, where I'm running for state Senate and they're like, but you served in the House, for 5 years. So why would, you were part of this problem, even though my voting record shows that I voted against all these, at bills and policies.
Yeah,
so
you,
at least I have
you
a voting
definitely
record.
were not a part of the problem. You were not a part of the problem, trying to be a part of the solution, and they didn't like that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and I authored the bill to end CCAP right after we heard about all the fraud and more than 50% fraud back in 2019. So, I have a history of showing that I was against it, but it's difficult for some of the legislators running who were voting for all these big policies and programs in these omnibus bills and things that are part of the problem. It's hard for them to run again. So while I had previously thought the best lieutenant governor pick would be someone with legislative experience, I think it is important that you be an outside ticket running to change things. And as President Trump has shown, you can support someone who hasn't been part of the D.C. establishment to go into D.C. and change things. And likewise, I think that's a positive part of your ticket is you are the outsider candidates running in this race.
Well, you saw how I won't say ineffective. You saw how much of a drag it was, even when he had Mike Pence on his ticket, the insider, right? Mm-hmm. But J.D. Vance, I don't consider J.D. Vance an insider. I mean, he was barely into his senatorial first term. And so I think that he's like hitting on all cylinders right now. Right. And it's only going to get better. But thank you for that comment there. We do have former legislators as advisory board members. I think Roger Chamberlain, former senator, is someone who's on our advisory board. It's helped head of he was a big proponent of education reform when he was in the Senate, and that's something that we want to do in a big way.
It's interesting to me. I think one of the problems we have, not just in Minnesota but across our country, is our education system, as you know, is absolutely failing. And even when you talk about the structure of government in Minnesota, people don't know anything about it. They assume, because we have a Senate and a House and then an administration and executive branch, that it's the same. But they don't understand that our Senate and our House is really the same thing exactly. Right. We have a unicameral government that we pretend isn't. Because if it were like the federal government, Minnesota wouldn't have been destroyed the way it's been, because every county would have had one vote or two votes, depending on how they decided to do it. And if we had that, we wouldn't be turning the entire state into Minneapolis.
Exactly.
We would be having the ability to at least try and influence what's happening in Minneapolis using the values that are the core of our history.
Right.
And I don't know, Jeremy, if you want to talk about that, but the House is kind of and they don't even get to debate anything. I mean, it's theater, political theater.
Yeah, I explained that. I spent yesterday at the Capitol, or this Thursday in the Capitol, and explained that the differences between the House and Senate, where the House, everything is prearranged. The bills, the amendments are all prearranged. So the only thing they can really vote on is stuff that's been pre-filed, and then as a caucus determined kind of how they're going to vote on things. And Kendall, a couple things I noted in your story about, registering as a Republican young. I too am a convert from a Democrat family. My parents and all my relatives were Democrats, and pretty far lefty Democrats. So I discovered the Republican Party in college and voted conservatively since then. And coming from both sides or coming from the other side, you can kind of speak that lingo, the language
Right.
of the left, and better understand where they are moved on arguments because you were, grew up in that or surrounded by that. And that's a powerful tool too, as a candidate, as opposed to being someone who was just raised Republican and you have a deeper reason why you support these things. And as Trump found with J.D. Vance, a convert is a great candidate, right? Someone who came to the correct side naturally and has a great story, can help sway people in the middle in independence.
Well, let me give you an example of that, and that's a great point, Jeremy. Look, I am the worst candidate for the Democrat Party right now because I can go to in the community, not just the black community, and just say this. There are 10 states that have the widest wealth gap between black and white citizens in the country. 10 states. Seven of them are Democrat states, including Minnesota.
Right.
They've been in charge for 50 years. We don't need to win them all. We just need to win enough.
Right.
If you want to grow generational wealth, if you're tired of this whole generational poverty and you want a different, give us a shot.
Right.
Give us a shot. We've never been in politics. We've been in business. I got out of poverty myself, my only one in my family, of my other siblings. We're now been married for 40 years. Now all my children are getting married, just like Charlie Kirk, get married, have children, leave a legacy. They're doing that in their 20s.
Right.
It can be done.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that we have a serious problem, and it's not the people of Minnesota that are the problem. It's we have a government infrastructure that perpetuates problems intentionally. They create jobs to create jobs, not to serve the people. We've forgotten to serve the people of our state with the programs that the taxpayers have entrusted to the government to run. We'll be back in a few minutes. Thanks for listening to Political Pitchforks.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson and also Kendall Qualls, candidate for governor, and his running mate, Brian Nicholson. And I think we want to get into some policy, and I want to ask you to expand on where you're at. We all know about your interest in education. We know our education system is failing. We're teaching kids not to think, actually. Goal of our public school system is to teach children to think, and we're doing the exact opposite. And we need to fix that, and that will have a domino effect in everything in our lives. And so why don't you talk a little bit about your policies and how you're going to change Minnesota for the better.
Okay, before I dive deep into the policy itself, but let me just, at a macro level, so let's go up 30,000 feet on education.
Yeah.
Yes, it's failing, but the indoctrination actually causes our students to divide amongst each other.
Yep.
But also, this is intentional, not know that they have been born in the greatest nation in the world,
Right.
and appreciate the country and love the country. They actually, in a lot of cases, hate the country.
Right.
And so I always share this. I'm going to give you why this is so important. So there was a survey done a few years back, 41,000 Americans, and all they did was give them this U.S. citizenship test. That's it. Those that were 60 and older, 74% of them passed. People that were 45 years and younger, only 19% could pass.
Right.
Same IQ levels, all that stuff, but the only difference is they haven't been taught it. Whatever they've been taught the sins of our nation, but none of its virtues.
Right.
And this has been deliberate because our teachers, colleges, half of the faculties are either socialists or Marxists. So we got an issue of helping to increase the academic excellence, but also reverse this issue and get back into civics of our country and basically the whole history of it. So, yeah, we're going to do school choice, ESAs, that type of thing. It's the parents decide where's the best place for their children to go, and the dollars follow with little to no coattails as possible so we don't have government in people's homes and everything else. So homeschool, private school, Christian school, all those things. But also, even in states that have school choice, and they've had them for years, still 70% of those kids and parents decide to go to public schools. So that's why we still have to make sure that we bump up the public school academic excellence.
Yeah. Hey, Kendall and Brian, were both of you, did both of you go to public schools, and do your kids go to public or private schools or homeschool?
Yeah. So I did go to public schools. I tell people I went to public schools in inner city, New York, as well as rural Oklahoma, and I got enough of an education to be competitive at Fortune 100 companies. Our kids are not even getting that today. Not black kids in Minneapolis. The average Minnesotan public school kids, 50% of them are not reading at grade level. So that's my background. My family, we homeschooled our kids, all 5 of them K through 12, and they're doing well. They don't have 3 eyes. They're functioning adults.
They can have conversation.
Great. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I went to public school also. It was great. We didn't think about anything about it. We were told often how good it was, and in retrospect, I would observe that was true. My kids do not go to public school. We have them in private school now. For many of the reasons we're just talking about. It's too much about what to think rather than how to think. And I think there's also too much of playing to the lowest common denominator rather than maximizing everybody's potential. And, as we all know, if you give a child a vision and a future and say, you need to become all that you can be, and that's what we expect from you, mm-hmm. they'll rise to that if they're asked to. Mm-hmm. And if what they're instead given is to play to grade level minimums, then you might get that far. And so we need to be shooting for higher aspirations for our kids, and that's a big part of our decision making process to make that change.
Yeah, that's critical. And I think we are going to have, and a lot of these issues all overlap really when it comes to business and education, and because the consequences are all equally intertwined. And I think I'm just going to have one quick example, not going too deep, sorry, Jeremy, is, we know, for example, some of the most popular charter schools are language immersion programs because they work, right? So American children who speak English, right, they go to English-speaking schools, and they come home to English-speaking parents. If you are a child, an immigrant, whether you're here legally or not, and you come to America and at home you're not speaking English, the only place you can learn English is at school. Or, and actually now because of cable, it's not even TV anymore, which is how people used to learn it. It's because now they can watch their native language. So a good model might be for education to take all non-English speaking students and put them in a school where they're immersed in English at school. But instead we do ESL programs where they basically are not taught English. And then we wonder why we have 300 languages in the Minneapolis public school, and we have 34 languages on everything the state of Minnesota sends to anybody.
Right.
You get 2 pieces of paper, double-sided, with 34 different languages interpreting your rights, right? And the cost of that, I don't even want to think about every time they send anything out to everybody in this entire state. But this issue of not helping people assimilate, because we actually have created policies and programs that prevent assimilation, which then ends up being an issue in our business world as kids graduate from high school, unable to speak or read English or write it.
Yeah, I think the point here is that we need to be Americans, and that doesn't mean we need homogeneity. What it means is we need some common baselines that allow us to interact. And we often talk about how we need to appreciate the diversity, and that's true. Mm-hmm. But we have to really mean it, and we can't just mean the diversity based on a skin color or religion. We have to mean diversity of thought,
right?
And we have to mean diversity of backgrounds and values. And this is where good teams get made, whether it's at a school project or in a business environment, whether it's political or otherwise. A good team has mixed backgrounds, but to be able to share those conversations, we have to have some commonality also. So diversity is great. But we also need to have the common pieces that hold a country together. And that starts with language, but it certainly continues through to some values and understanding what America has created, which is an opportunity to have disagreements and to have debate. And those are good things. And you get better decisions as a result of that. And we just have to appreciate that rather than stifle it.
Yeah. So for businesses, where do you think you're going to head? What are your 2 or 3 number 1 policy initiatives that you want to really?
Oh, there's a laundry list. Obviously, the taxes, regulation, and permitting, all of that. I mean, this is deliberate. Again, if you're a socialist, when they say they're socialists, believe them. They're anti-capitalist. So I think the biggest issue is, even in the Republican Party, we don't know who our opponents are.
That's right.
Okay? So what's been happening in our schools is deliberate. These multiple languages and everything else is to divide us as a nation, and then they've been doing it for purpose. So anyway, to answer your question, yes, the taxes, the regulations, the permitting. So we got to unleash that innovation and let those innovators do it.
Right.
Government doesn't create jobs.
Right.
We foster an environment for that to happen.
Right.
But one thing we can do, we can open up issues like the Iron Range. That has been deliberately slow walked. We're going to open that up. And I tell people all the time, look, for 10 years, over 10 years, people from California, New Jersey, all of the blue states have been moving to Tennessee, Texas, and Florida. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I want to do is put a big ad budget behind Minnesota, because the worst place to be in the summer months is Tennessee, Texas, and Florida. And I want to bring them here to make Minnesota the family destination space for summer vacations.
Well, by the way, just like everybody can't live in America, everybody can't live in Tennessee, Texas, and Florida.
Exactly.
So all they're doing is moving the line. We're ceding ground.
That's exactly right.
All we're doing.
That's exactly it.
Yep.
Because I have friends that live there, and they're telling me how Dallas has changed. Nashville just had a special election. Yep. And the Democrat that lost, who hated country music, said it on podcast, hated country music, hated everything about Nashville, she got 46% of the vote.
That's crazy. I think there's so many examples of how Minnesotans are born innovators. Mm-hmm. Our heritage, our climate, our culture, right, all said we were builders. We were people who knew how to figure things out, yep, how to create solutions where there weren't some before. Right. And we still have all those feelings. We have all of those attributes and capabilities. And what we're doing is we're creating all of those future leaders, future innovators, inventors, all of that, and then we're farming them out.
Right.
So many of our friends are on the path. And across the campaign trail, even already, we hear over and over again, if we don't get this fixed, we're going to have to go. And when we go, we don't only lose the revenue, we don't only lose the tax base, but we lose all of those great job creators. We lose all of those great people. And we just can't have that.
And even if the parents are staying, they're telling their kids to move somewhere else because they can visit them.
That's right.
Yeah, I recently saw a report about how many of the Minnesota colleges and universities are losing students. Right. And this has been going on for several years, where Minnesota families are no longer sending their kids to Minnesota schools. They're sending them out of state. And in response, Minnesota lawmakers passed this groundbreaking legislation to give away taxpayer-funded education at state colleges and universities for any family who could get their adjusted gross income under $80,000 a year. And that still has not changed the numbers. We still continue to have more students. So families are choosing to send their kids to out-of-state colleges instead of in-state colleges, even with free tuition. But, and I'm going to put myself in that category because my daughter is going to school in South Dakota next year. And it's just between the policies and the crime at University of Minnesota, things like that. Parents are sending their kids out of state.
But not only that, there's a program called the Direct Admit Program. People in Minnesota always think that everything is a Minnesota thing. Actually, many of these things are statewide. They just call them different things, and they don't tell you it's happening everywhere. But we have a program called the Direct Admit Program, and it has all of the colleges and universities are participating in it now, except Carleton, I think St. Olaf McAllister, and the Twin Cities campus of the University of Minnesota. This program waives all requirements for admission, except you have to submit an application and graduate. That's it. They don't care about your scores, anything, but you submit an application. And high schools all over the state are participating in this program. And we already had 70 to 80% of our students unable to pass remedial tests in English and math. Now we have completely eliminated standards for college. And if you're trying to pick a college for your children, you want your kids to go where they're going to be pushed to be better, right?
That's right.
And we have to address this. But anyways, we're on a break now from Political Pitchforks. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thanks for listening.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks. I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson and governor candidate Kendall Qualls with his running mate Brian Nicholson. And we have to obviously talk about fraud, but I want you to talk about the fraud and I want you to talk about the hope for the future, despite all the bad that's happened.
Sure. You know, when you talk about fraud itself, what you're talking about really is a symptom of something, and that's called failed leadership, right? Leaders don't let the fraud happen in the first place. Addressing the fraud, auditing, and everything else, that's all reactive and basically a symptom of a contaminated culture, really. In the private sector, this may happen 6 months, because we do quarterly financial reports. We know when there's something amiss. It might happen in the next quarter. By then, there's something amiss, and you're going to find someone who's been accountable for that.
Right.
And they're going to be fired, charged for embezzlement, or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
To have this go on for 10 years says there's a leadership problem, not only in the Democrat Party, but also in our party. Because we should have been on over this. Guess what? We're not going to sign off, and we're not going to vote for any of these bills until we get this account. That's called leadership and courage, and we've been lacking it.
Yep, and create a record that you're going to stand up. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, Kendall, Representative Matt Dean, who was the majority leader in the House, had commissioned a report. Like back in 2016, they hired like an auditing company to go out and audit a portion of government. I think it was 2016. They came back with like $600 million in fraud back in 2016. As a state legislator, we heard from the Office of Office of Legislative Auditor that over half of the daycare money, like $250 million back in 2018, was fraud. And you're right, there hasn't been on the Republican or Democrat side, just a line in the sand drawing saying we need to fix this or shut the programs down, as President Trump has recently done.
Yeah, good point, Jamie. My point is, where's the fraud committee back then? Where were the alarm bells and all that, right? This had to go national before we got this, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is going on type of thing. That's typical politics. And it's the reason why I'm involved. If this was being done by the Republican Party here in our state, I wouldn't even be involved today. So this goes back to what the nature of the show, in the title of your show. We've outsourced our civic duty as citizens to permanent class politicians.
Right.
It was never intended to be that way from the founding fathers, and this is what we're getting it for. What we're getting,
and they warned
as a result.
us. Let's be clear, we were all warned.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And I think that's the exciting part about where we stand right now. And it's easy to be frustrated about all the things that are going on. It's so righteous, but we also have to realize that the steps we all take to fix it are very simple.
Yep.
And we just stop putting up with it. We the silent majority, we're Minnesota nice, and we all shake our heads, and we politely don't talk about it in public because we're not supposed to, and it might stir somebody up. But we have to say we're not doing that anymore. We have to say this is enough, and we have to say that we're going to step forward, and what we're going to do is we're going to put people in office that represent us. This is not a political class. This is going to be we the people, because we have to govern ourselves. So that's what we have to do, and it's just that simple.
And it is that simple. We have to be bold and brave, and we just have to do it. Don't vote for your friend because you don't want to feel bad. Be honest with your friend. Hey, you know what? You might be called to do something. It's not this. Let's figure it out. We have to be honest about who our people are and whether they're going to fight for fixing this.
Right.
You're so right. And if you don't, you gotta have the bravery. And where does that bravery come from? For people like you, it comes from your faith. You're not afraid about it.
And the neat thing about that, courage is contagious.
Right.
When they see us standing up, it encourages others to get involved. School board, city council, county commissioners. We need to start instilling that, and it can happen.
Yeah,
that's right. And I think if there were one element of encouragement, I'd give your listeners is that now is your time. Like now is your time to do this, and if not now, we're going to lose this forever. So this, people say things like that in politics because we're trying to create a sense of urgency. But I would challenge you to just look around and ask if that's what this is. This is not just a convenient slogan. This is really real, and most Minnesotans are really aware of that. And this is the time that we just step forward and say this is enough, and we need to put the right people in the right places to start fixing some stuff.
Yeah, Jeremy.
So I want to talk about another topic quickly, if we can slide one in, and that's on healthcare. Obviously, for 30 to 40% of Americans who write big, income tax payable checks to the Department of Revenue. That's a big issue. That the tax and the fraud comes in. But for healthcare, my family, we spend a lot of money on private health insurance. What kind of ideas do you have that can address the high costs of healthcare?
Yeah, you know what? Our states, our 50 states, should be our laboratories of innovation, and healthcare is one of those. And so I'm a big fan of Twyla Bray's and what her organization does. There are states that actually have carved out of their healthcare state healthcare budget some innovative ways to do that. You get waivers from the federal government on these things. That's what I want to do. How can we make that relationship between the patient and the doctor much closer? Market driven pricing on these things. Transparency in drug prices and also what you go in the hospital for, what's it cost. Transparency in prices will help drive down costs, but also that model of what it used to be between patient and doctor, and actually paying for it yourself, but you'll have a budget that would have been spent at the state level for it. So those are going to be some innovative things that we're going to do that are actually working in some other states.
Well, we know when you require insurance, you require it, people now are forced to buy what's available. And as those prices go up, there isn't a person you could talk to in the state that doesn't tell you not only did their premiums go up 25 to 35%, their deductibles and their copays went up, their out-of-pocket totals went up. But you know what else happened? All the services available to them, medications, treatments, all went down.
Right. Let me give you an example of this real quick. So LASIK surgery was never covered by insurance. When it first came out, it was $5,000, to do repair. Today, it's down like to $1,000. Technology's improved, the services are broader, because market forces created a decrease in cost, not an increase like the rest of healthcare.
Right.
That's the kind of concept I want to get back to.
Yeah. Kendall, do you have a few things on crime that you'd like to talk about, your positions or policies? How can we decrease violent crime in the city?
This is something most people didn't know. Like in October 2009, Forbes magazine rated 40 major cities in the country. Minneapolis was the safest city in the nation with the best quality of life. We're going to get it back. Look, it's the governor's job to ensure safety of its citizens regardless of where they live, as well as the protection of their personal property. It's not being done in the Twin Cities. Right. We would hire law enforcement officers at the state level because good men and women are not going to put their lives on the line for the city council of the Twin Cities. They're not going to do it. They'll do it at the state level, and we'll deploy them in the Twin Cities to ensure the safety and make sure that we get it back. That's the governor's job, day one. And so we'll make that happen. The first way to get in Twin Cities back is people got to feel safe. And we're going to get that done.
You're going to liberate the people.
That's right.
That's
yeah.
right.
And Brian and Kendall, how can people get a hold of the campaign? How can they follow along and maybe even volunteer or donate? Do you have a website and some socials to throw out there?
Yeah, KQ4MN, KQFORMN.com is the website. That's the best place to start, and you can get everywhere else from there.
Great. And I also want to plug an important event in Apple Valley at Bogart's on this coming Wednesday. There is an event called the Abiding Debate. I think it's hosted by the Scott County Republicans.
Right.
That is going to have all of the candidates who have agreed to abide by the endorsement at the party convention, which is the Lisa Damuth campaign, Patrick Knight's campaign, and of course, you guys will be there. Kendall Qualls is abiding by the endorsement as well.
Right. We've had, I think, about 10 of those in the past, and I won 7 out of 10 of those. The others were questionable, but we'll just go. We'll go with that. But look forward to this. This is things that are like right up our topic, like we're talking about today. So this comes across very natural, very easy, because the solutions are easy. It's called leadership is the number one issue that's driving it.
Yeah. We're almost out of time. I want to mention something too. I've mentioned to other candidates. I might have even mentioned to your wife. Donald Trump in his first term established the White House Faith Office. Of course, Biden, didn't continue it. Trump brought it back again. And I think that the attacks on religious liberty, which is the first liberty, it is the first liberty, is under attack. I mean, the Democrats have openly said it. They want to get rid of it, religious liberty. I think that this is something you should consider thinking about and talking about, is the need to have an office that protects people's right to, exercise of religious liberties. We don't have anybody protecting that. And I think the model that Trump has pushed is a good one. And I don't know if you've thought about it or heard about it, but
I'm absolutely in favor of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely in favor of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I want to thank you for listening to Political Pitchforks. We have not very many statewide candidates left, Jeremy, but we're working on getting them all queued up, in the next few weeks. We appreciate you listening and encouraging other people to listen. We want to inform you and educate you and give these candidates an opportunity to make sure people hear from them directly, really what they're going to do if they get elected. So thanks for listening.